This podcast is brought to you by the Heldridge Hotel, New Brunswick's only 4-star hotel and a preferred hotel of Rutgers football fans. The Heldridge helps you make the most of your game day weekend, providing premium accommodations in the cultural heart of downtown New Brunswick. Restaurants, bars, theaters, parks, museums, and more are only steps away. Whether you're traveling alone or with a large group, book your stay at the Heldridge and make the most of your game day weekend. Visit theheldridge.com today.
Save on Cox Internet when you add Cox Mobile and get fiber-powered internet at home and unbeatable 5G reliability on the go. So whether you're playing a game at home,
yes, cool,
or attending one live, you can do more without spending more. Learn how to save at cox.com/internet. Cox Internet is connected to the premises via coaxial cable. Cox Mobile runs on the network with unbeatable 5G reliability as measured by Ookla LLC in the U.S. 2H 2023. Results may vary, not an endorsement. Other restrictions apply.
From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politi and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lenny. Let's start shopping.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Rant. Just Politi and Fonseca. Lanny's off. Got a win to talk about, Brian. An actual basketball win. We're going to talk about the DC, the defensive coordinator hire later in the show, but we're going to start with victory over Illinois. It's funny. I went to bed thinking the same thing you led with in your story, right? I had one prevailing thought, and I clicked on your story, and there it is in the first sentence. This is how it was supposed to look. Exactly. That's how I felt watching it. This was, both of these freshmen playing at a high level. Dylan's back, dunks. The best 10 minutes of the season, punching Illinois in the face. The rack is rocking. I mean, the whole thing. A couple of governors courtside, like the atmosphere, the win over a ranked team. Let's just focus on that right away. Best game of the season.
No doubt. And I agree, right? Like this was, and I kind of asked Steve Pikiell this after the game. He didn't really play along, but like when you sat before the season and envisioned what everything could look like if it went right, last night was it. Right. Aside from the 12 minutes to start the second half where Rutgers could not stop Illinois at all. Aside from that, like Rutgers played a pretty much a perfect game, as good as you could hope for on both ends. Just tremendous defensively. Illinois played into some of that as well. Their insistence on shooting more threes than any other Big Ten team, despite being the worst three-point shooting team in the Big Ten, is befuddling to me. But the point remains, Rutgers played great defense. Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey were tremendous offensively to start. And everyone else, the role players, played their part, right? Like, obviously, Dylan and Ace carried them to this win. The biggest shots of the game, I would argue, were P.J. Hayes and Zach Martini hitting humongous threes at a big point where Illinois was threatening to turn the game the other way. Mm-hmm. And they, obviously, P.J. Hayes accidentally, but makes one of the greatest closing moves of all time, missing a layup and grabbing his own rebound.
The whole time I'm screaming, no! Like the ball in his hands, the whole thing, the entire sequence. You're like, oh, okay. Sometimes the ball ends up in your hands and it worked out. Yeah, but that was hilarious. Yeah, you
and 7,000 other people going, no! I mean, even the officiating crew who got booed to high heaven by the vintage rack crowd. Even Jeffrey Anderson is boxing out for Ace Bailey.
That's so great.
Come on, big fella, get to the rim.
I can't. Yeah, that was one of my favorite moments of the season. And it's so funny because as I'm watching it, I'm like, was that good luck or did he do that on purpose? And an Ace in the press conference, who, by the way, we're going to miss the hell out of Ace Bailey. Like, I mean, he is just unvarnished joy on the court, but he's been a blast to cover because he does not give a shit about what he says. And so his quote was, "That's high IQ, big dog." And I think the big dog in question is Kevin Armstrong, our intrepid reporter. Just funny. Yeah. Like you watch it live and that's just I've never seen that happen. Right. When a referee is literally in between, like he's separating two fighters after a punch below the belt, essentially between Ace Bailey and the kid from Illinois. It was a really funny play.
It went viral as it should, right? One, because it's Ace Bailey, and two, because it's high knees ref, just the perfect confluence of like memes. And then you watch the video, it's one thing, but then there's screenshots from Ant Wright where initially it looks like he's setting a screen for Ace, but to prove that he's the number one referee in the country per KenPom, he does the other side and looks like he's guarding Ace and doubling him in the post at the end of the shot. Just like one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And obviously, like, it all worked out. If I'm Illinois, I am fuming that you lose this game.
Right. I mean, it happens. I don't know. It's not like he was, High Needs was laughing as he went up the court. He's like, I'm sure he's embarrassed.
Sure. I just say Brad Underwood was very subtly hinting that Rutgers got a good whistle when he's talking about Dylan Harper did a great job getting fouled. Rutgers took 34 free throws. They made more free throws than field goals during the game. So if Brad Underwood and I see that, I'm calling the league office tomorrow. But still hilarious, an all-time moment for this season.
Yeah. And Dylan, look, we were wondering if he would play. I mean, I think we both knew he'd come back eventually. I think you thought he would be later. I knew it would be, I don't know. I didn't know it would be this game, certainly. And if he did come back this game, I think we both would be surprised to just see how well he played. Like, he did not look limited at all. Looked a little gassed at times. 34 minutes. Robbie Hummel on Big Ten Network was constantly talking. He looks gassed. Well, of course he does. He hasn't played in 3 weeks. But 28 points, 7 of 15, 11 of 12 on the line, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals, 1 block, 1 foul. I mean, and I get it. Like, we forgot, I think, a little bit. Maybe not forgot, but just overlooked the fact that he's one of the best guards in the country. And that was a performance of one of the best guards in the country.
Yeah. He was great in the beginning, right? Kind of sparking that beginning run. He was really clutch in the second half, hitting some big threes and hitting a layup and making the free throws down the stretch. And it did seem like there was some emotional boost there because he looked obviously so glad to be back on the court. He's hitting threes and flashing the 3 to the Illinois bench and he's pumping up the crowd the entire game. So I think, I certainly think that it was the main reason they won this game. I do think either Rutgers has the greatest, training staff in the history of college basketball, or he probably didn't have a high ankle sprain, or maybe he had the least severe high ankle sprain of all time. Because, we were talking, could he be injured the rest of the year with a month left in the season? And all of a sudden he's back and looking better than he did. Certainly he's looked the best he looked since the triple-double against Columbia. Which again is a good sign, right? Like, this sets Rutgers up, it elevates their floor significantly. Is it too late? I don't know. We could discuss that, but certainly you give yourself a chance when you have Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper both playing well and close to full health.
Right. This is the first time they both play well together in a while. And I think the other thing, if you're looking for positives as a Rutgers fan, it really wasn't a perfect game. I mean, your front court again was not great. I mean, Latham Somerville in foul trouble. I think Bryce Dortch is going to have a high ceiling in a couple of years. He's not ready for this role, so at one point, and watching it in real time when they've got the 2 freshmen on the floor with Zach Martini, PJ Hayes, and Dylan Grant, who's having a terrible game. And you're like, I mean, if Illinois doesn't, score 8 rebounds off this guy, you just look at it, and they managed to get through it. There's it's Steve Peichel kind of finding like mad scientist looking at the end of the bench, like I think we thought he might be able to do early in the year before we recognized the limitations of those guys, right? Like, we thought he's got a deep bench this year. He's gonna be able to play around with this. He got through some dicey moments with some strange lineups late in the game.
Yeah, he's like shortening the rotation and certainly making game by game, matchup by matchup, decisions, right? Like Tyson Acuff was playing 20 minutes a game, and now he played 4 minutes yesterday.
Surprised by that, yeah.
Jordan Dirk, Dylan Harper coming back plays a huge part of that.
Still
right?
4, I guess.
Sure, I understand, but like his role is to score, right? He's not a great defender. When he's out there as a defender, it's pretty bad for everybody. So Dylan Harper kind of makes up for it. Is obviously a better scorer, better defender, better all around. So wasn't really much space there. And then he played Dirk Hack 4 minutes, maybe 4 minutes too much, frankly. I mean, he had a rough game as well.
Yeah.
So he's making game by game decisions, which is good. That's what you want from a coach. And I mean, are these the perfect pieces to be tinkering around with? Probably not, but it worked out. I will say that stretch at the start of the second half, they gave up 16 scores on the first 17 possessions. They had 1 defensive rebound in the first 12 minutes, and that was off of a missed free throw. Illinois hit 14 of its first 20 shots and rebounded those 6 misses. Like, they could not do anything, which is hugely alarming, right? Because, like, again, it is mind-numbing to me that Brad Underwood I saw the mismatch inside, right? Everyone and their mother saw the mismatch inside. How he couldn't get his team to just throw the ball inside from the beginning, I cannot comprehend it. Obviously, it benefited Rutgers, and Rutgers was able to recover from that. Ace Bailey was getting 4 really, really important defensive rebounds in the last 8 minutes, and everyone else kind of chipping in there and defending better towards the end. But yeah, like as high as the ceiling for this team can become offensively with Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, the defensive floor is really, really low with this really lack of bodies in the front court. You have one true center. That's going to come back to bite you, especially in the Big Ten.
Right. And it's just weird. It really is a weird team. Like the more you talk about it, like Dirk Hack, you meant it was just like, when was that? Like 4 years ago when he had like 30 points in the Garden, it's just guys come and go, slip on the lineup. It really, it's a funny team. And I get it. The injury to Dylan makes that part of that. Certainly those two have been consistent, but man, there've been some ups and downs. All right. Now, I promise we shouldn't be talking about this, but we have a podcast. We have to talk about 8 games left. Like it just, all right. I'm sure it's the first thing every Rutgers fan this morning woke up and before, they even, rubbed the sleep out of their eyes, looked up to see where the net ranking was, up to 71. That doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant. It's now just winning games. And I guess it's funny, Brad that was on our favorite bracketologist, whose name is Cliff Omori for me now, for whatever reason. Wachtel. Thank you. I don't know why I can't pronounce that. So bizarre. Kirk Shiraka. I managed to get that right. Why can't I get Brad Wachtel right? Anyway, so for those holding out hope, Scarlet Knights need to go 6-2 the rest of the way for a chance at an at-large bid. Even with a healthy Harper, it will be a tall task. I pressed him out of them like, so when you say there's a chance, you're saying there's a good chance or a slim chance? He doesn't know, because we don't know what the bubble's going to look like. We don't know what the 6 of the 8 wins are going to be. I mean, the 6 of the 8 games they would have to win. It's still a lot in the air, but the fact that there is a chance, I guess that's good. There's a chance.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the Rutgers basketball team is the cockroach that just will not die in the nuclear apocalypse. Like they just refuse to be eliminated. Look, the bubble is weak every year. The fact that Indiana, I saw, was one of the first 4 teams out of this field, it tells me this is a very weak bubble. Rutgers has 4 quad 1 wins. Rutgers is one of 32 teams in the country with 4 quad 1 wins, and the other 31 are pretty much in the field. Rutgers is obviously not. One, because they don't have enough wins, and because they have those 2 quad 3 losses.
Yeah.
If they win 6 of the last 2, that puts them at probably at least 6, maybe 7 quad 1 wins. And you're assuming one of those wins has to be Minnesota. Right?
Right, of course. Yeah.
I mean, if you're a Rutgers fan, you're staring down that season finale against Minnesota. You're having flashbacks to 2 years ago when all you had to do was beat Minnesota, and then you missed the tournament. So obviously you have to win the games that you have to win: Minnesota, Washington, and then you got to pick off. You have 3 home games left. You got to win all 3.
Let's break this down. So there are 3 games against teams below Rutgers in the Big Ten standings: Washington 2-8, Minnesota 4-8, Iowa 4-7. Must win all 3. That gets you to 8 Big Ten wins. Then you have 2 against teams with the same number of Big Ten wins. Interesting, right? These are toss-up games. They're not like, that's Oregon, which is falling apart, 5-7, and USC, which is 5-6, probably above where people expected them to be, I would say. So, you've got 2. USC is at home. At Oregon's a tough place to play, but 2 toss-up game. Rutgers has played well on the road. All right. So their West Coast trip, they've never done that before. We have no idea how that's going to go. All right. Then you have the other 3. I mean, the problem is the other 3, for me at least. At Maryland, at Michigan, at Purdue. I mean, that's as good. That is as tough a 3 of, maybe if you had a Michigan State or not UCLA in there, I get it, but that's a pretty tough 3 to find 1 or 2 wins in.
Yeah, look, if you win Sunday against Maryland on Super Bowl Sunday in College Park, then you're cooking with gas. Then you're really
have a conversation. Right.
Yeah, this turns from a kind of obligatory talk to like maybe there's actually somewhat of a chance here. If you lose to Maryland, then again your razor thin margin again becomes even more thin, because you have to win at least one of those 2 road games at Michigan and at Purdue, which are matchup nightmares and hard places to win. And you have to sweep the rest of the schedule, which is a really hard ask for a team whose longest win streak this season is 4 games against low major opponents. Yeah. You're asking a team that has not done any of this to completely turn around its season. It's a big ask. Now, the more important conversation is the Big Ten tournament race. Yesterday was a huge win in that regard because you create some separation between yourself, Minnesota, and Penn State. Right. Washington is essentially bound to miss the tournament. They're 2-9. They just got smoked last night. They are easily the worst team in the Big Ten, despite spending $2 million on a center. Go figure. So you really are fighting to avoid the last two spots. You have a decent advantage over you have an advantage over Nebraska head-to-head. You have a chance of getting an advantage over Minnesota because you play them head-to-head. You're in a decent spot with Penn State. And then Iowa is a team that's battling to make the Big Ten tournament. You play them on Wednesday. That's a game that if you win, you're pretty much golden as far as making the Big Ten tournament. And to me, again, you watched the way Rutgers played last night. You envision them playing that well, as Robbie Hummel noted on the field of 68 last night, on a short scout. Like teams have 1 day, 24 hours to prepare for this team in the tournament. You play that well for 5 straight days, you're going to make the NCAA tournament. So I could see a scenario where Rutgers gets hot. They did it last night against the most inconsistent team in the Big Ten. They have the tools to do it if everything breaks right for them. The issue is that this is a season where almost nothing breaks right for them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And it is a big ask, and in certain points. Yeah, I don't want to say obviously the way the season started. Are we looking at the Rutgers football scenario here, where based on where they were, you're like, all right, well, if they're playing well enough and they get into the NIT or they get into, I'm going to call it our second trip to Vegas. If they get into that event, do you feel better about the season? Are we at that consolation prize level with this, where like the Rape Bowl is like, all right, yeah, we had a lot of adversity and we managed to get it. Like, is that where this is?
First of all, it's the crown. Just get used to it. That might be where we end up in a month's time.
The crown.
Second of all,
we have to stay at the MGM Grand again. Is that where it's going to be? Full circle.
If you could pay for your hotel room on the craps table, you could stay wherever you'd like. Now, to answer your question, it depends who you ask. If you ask, the diehard fan, if you ask Steve Peichel and the staff, if you ask people, with vested interest in the program, I think the answer is yes. You can spin it in a way where it's like, given all that we dealt with, Dylan Harper's injury, Jeremiah Williams' illness, the schedule, everything together, you can reasonably put together a case that like, hey, this wasn't that bad. Right. If you ask me, anything outside of making the NCAA tournament is a failure. I do not think there's any way to negotiate it. You got to make the tournament for the season to not be a failure. There's no scenario in my mind where playing the crown or the NIT while having 2 of the top 5 picks in the NBA draft is ever excusable.
Right. No,
what do you think?
I'm with you. No, I'm with you totally. Yeah. And yeah, it's just, you have to look at the season in its totality to remember how this thing started, all the problems before everyone got hurt. I get it. Yeah. But I will say it would take some of the sting off, because I think it will go from an all-time holy crap disappointment, like the biggest disappointment in school history, to that was disappointing. Like there's levels of disappointment, right? Like from the base, if this this thing spiraled, if Dylan didn't play again, if they missed the Big Ten tournament, it would have been just the dumpster fire to end all dumpster fires. This is more like, oh, that sucked. I guess that's the best way I'd put it.
I disagree. To me, it's a binary. You make the tournament or you don't make the tournament.
There's no level. There's just levels of. Look at Seton Hall. There are different levels of missing the tournament. You can miss the tournament, empty your building, and go 6-30. Right? There's different levels, I guess.
It's the same thing.
15-50. Same thing to you. Okay.
It's the same thing. It's a binary. You make the tournament with 2 5-star top 5 NBA picks, or you don't. Whether you go 6-30 or whatever, it doesn't matter. You make the tournament or you don't. That's it. It doesn't. I hear
you live in a very black and white world. I like it.
No, I don't want to rationalize this in any way. And I do also want to say another thing. I had a discussion about hypotheticals in my Twitter replies yesterday, right? Like about, why I was being negative, like if Dylan Harper played against, if he was healthy, like things would change, I think we still have to, the Kennesaw State thing, the Seton Hall thing, the Princeton thing still happened. And I don't want to get lost in this world of hypotheticals, because I can totally see this being the rationalization in May, in June. Man,
oh, absolutely.
Dylan Harper's ankle just, didn't get hurt. Man, if Jeremiah Williams didn't get the flu. Man, if Emmanuel Ogble's knees didn't get hurt, maybe there'd be a chance. I want to fight back now and often, because I am already sick of the narrative that will be created this offseason, next offseason. I cannot tell you how much my blood boils when I hear, oh, if it wasn't for the pandemic, it would have been 3 straight tournaments. I hate it. It bothers me to no end.
It's going to be the second hypothetical tournament that Rutgers would have made. It's going to be good.
Like I said, Rutgers belongs in the SEC. They are the kings of hypotheticals.
If Woody had gone directly to the police. I'm sorry. That's an old reference. All right. There's a question for you. Would the committee care? And this is one of those gray areas, because Rutgers lives on the bubble. We talked about it. The committee did not care about the Ohio State, the game they quote unquote won at Ohio State a couple of years ago. We thought, oh, they'll take that into consideration if it's close. Did not care. Did not take it into consideration. I wonder, and Brad seemed to think on Twitter that perhaps they would take in consideration the way this team was playing with a healthy Dylan Harper versus the way it hadn't. The numbers will be glaring. If they do get close, it'll be something like, 8-3 with Dylan and whatever without. It's going to be pretty obvious that this is a different team with Dylan. Of course, it's a different team with Dylan. I just wonder if sitting in a room in Indianapolis, there's going to be people who look at that and go, huh, okay. So, I guess they went 5-3 down the stretch. They won at Purdue, but they couldn't. I just wonder if there's going to be some people who are going to put the metrics aside and acknowledge, because the goal is to take the best 30 whatever at-large teams, right?
In theory. If the committee was consistent, which is a hard thing to believe in, right? But if they are consistent year to year, this would be the inverse of the Mawot Mag situation, where a good team got bad, lost a bunch of games to end the season, and was left out of the tournament because they were a different team than they were earlier in the season. Mm-hmm. If Rutgers is going to be anywhere near the bubble conversation, it's because they win a vast majority of their final 8 games and look like a different team with a healthy Dylan Harper. So I can certainly see that having an impact if Rutgers, again, is the first team out, if they're right on the cusp and they're making a decision. And I do think, as much as people might say that this doesn't have an impact, I fully believe that the committee will look at Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey in the NCAA tournament versus whoever, USC, Indiana, whoever's the last team in, and say, I want these guys on national television. I want these guys to be playing in the tournament. I mean, Robbie Hummel basically expressed that, right? Like, you want the best teams and the best players in these moments. And I certainly think that will be a bias that helps Rutgers if it ever gets to that. Obviously, again, we're a little bit away from that, but to answer your question, unless the committee is so starkly different than it's been in the past, which is certainly possible, I think that if Rutgers puts itself in that position, it would have a really good chance of making the tournament.
Yeah. Right now, according to ESPN, Rutgers has got about an 8% chance again. So it's just good to keep all this in mind. And I think the right way to approach it, next 2 games, give me 2 W's. We'll be having this podcast, and it will be it'll still be leaning toward not, but it'll be real, right? This is still fantasy talk. I need to see 2 more W's before this can be a real conversation. That's what I think.
Yes. Yeah. Bart Torvik had it 1.7%, by the way. So he has a little bit more.
Even after this win, 1.7?
Yeah, it was 0.3% yesterday. It's now 1.7%. And he does it on 10,000 simulations a day.
I'd like to point out 1.7, I believe, is the exact odds that the asteroid is going to hit the Earth in 2032. So wouldn't that be perfect? Wouldn't that be perfect? Rutgers makes the NCAA tournament, and then all life on the planet is obliterated. That's about the same odds. Yeah,
sounds about right.
Sounds about right. All right. Anything else? You want to jump to the DC?
To your point again, Maryland. We're in the late cycle of like Rutgers gets a win, and all of a sudden they're going to win all the rest of their games, right? It happened against Nebraska, it happened with Northwestern, and
done
the
it 3
cold
times.
hard reality happened the next game, right? So again, this is an opportunity for Rutgers to break that spell, get a huge win after another huge win, stack huge wins, and then we can get them for real.
Yeah. And I don't think Maryland, they've had a good year. Like, I don't think they're a great team. Like, I think that's a game. With a healthy Dylan, it's a game they can steal. Do you disagree?
Maryland has a humongous advantage inside. They have 2 really
every team they play now is going to have that. Yeah.
Right. But they have an elite veteran in Julian Reese, and they have a really good 5-star freshman in Derek Queen. Those are two really high-level bigs, and they have some stud guards that I was watching their game at Indiana, for example. And again, Indiana is in the class of the Big Ten, but they have some guys who can hit some shots, man. Like really, really talented teams, and they play Kevin Willard defense. So I think this is a legitimate challenge. Rutgers has won games at Maryland in the past, right? It's not this house of horrors. But again, I'm having flashbacks to when, Sticks, I can't remember his full name, but like he was a really, really good center Maryland had years ago, would just, dominate Rutgers. I have a hard time thinking that Lathan Somerville, Bryce Dortch, and Dylan Grant could keep up with those two really good guys they have up there. That's going to be the key. Maybe PJ Hayes has a crazy game from three. Maybe Zach Martini has a crazy game from three. That's kind of where I see Rutgers having to have the advantage most of the way to win these games. And just the last stat from yesterday's game that I thought was really interesting. Ace Bailey went 0 of 7 from 3 against Michigan. He did not take a single 3 last night.
That's wild. I want him shooting those too. Like I don't care if he's 0 of 7 against Michigan. I think he is still the best 3-pointer shooter on the team. I get it. The numbers not might show it, but if I had to take one guy to hit a shot, it's Dylan. But if I take two guys to hit a shot, certainly I want Ace Bailey taking more shots than anybody else. I mean, of course, right?
Yeah. And again, the interesting thing is, right, against Michigan, he probably shouldn't have taken those shots because he's getting doubled every time he touches the ball and he can't get an outlet. Yeah. It's so clear the difference when you have Dylan Harper to relieve some of that pressure. You can't double both of those guys or else you're playing 3-on-1. So again, the difference Dylan makes is not only when he has the ball in his hands, but it's also the space he opens up for everyone around him because he creates so much pressure and so much leverage when he has the ball that he can do so many different things. Opens things up for Ace Bailey, takes some pressure off him as far as defenders on him, and I'm sure takes some pressure off him mentally to not have to feel like I'm the guy that has to carry this team again. You can split the load with Dylan.
Right. The good thing about this, and this is where we'll end it, and then we'll talk about the DC. If they do pull this off, it will be the reverse of the worst story. You know what I'm talking about? Like the opportunity to write a just incredible story from where they were to make the NCAA tournament. It would be the arc of that thing to go from the lowest of lows to seeing Rutgers pop up on Selection Sunday. It would be one of the best stories in Rutgers sports history. Let's put it that way. If they can pull this off, I don't think there's any question. Top 5.
Yeah. It would be the best possible narrative. I don't think it'd be the best possible outcome because I thought when you have a foundation of these two guys, you should be competing for a Big Ten title, which I think is infinitely more fun for everyone, for fans, for the team, for writers.
Right.
But
we don't have that story. That story's dead. Yeah. Right.
Well, yes, but I'm saying like if you're even before the season, if you're talking about what's the best arc for a 30 for 30, it would be that.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, leads with PJ Hayes storming in to get that last rebound. There'd be so many possible potentials to that, the beginning of that. How does it go? How's the 30 for 30 thing go again?
What if I told you?
What if I told you transfer from San Diego would be at the 3-point line, Illinois on the other court? Is that a good NPR? Was that a good 30 for 30 voice?
It's better than mine.
Yeah, that'd be pretty funny. What if I told you? All right. They still do those? They're still making those?
I played in the background,
And then you'd have like dejected. You'd have that face. Then they'd flash to Dylan with his hands on his head and the scream after like Ace got the technical at Penn State. They'd have some images. 30 for 30. Steve Pikiell's road to glory.
Get Bill Simmons on the horn.
Bill Simmons, get him on the horn. All right. That was fun. Let's talk defensive coordinator. I recognize what I said, and this is important to on the last show. I really made it pretty clear I did not think it was an important hire. Who cares? Well, they're going to hire somebody, they'll pick somebody, and then they hire the guy they fired 3 years ago, and you're like, wait, what? So Robb Smith, the new defensive coordinator, the old defensive coordinator, it's like the trilogy, the Robb Smith trilogy. He's back for a third time. There's really hard, and I get it. You're gonna be the positive guy in this segment. So fans, buckle up. Brian's taking the glass half full. Part of this, it's hard to call it an exciting hire though, right? I mean, it's just kind of like, and I get it. He was good when he was good when he had talent. Took him to the NFL the first time around. But I mean, he's a guy you could have hired him, 9 weeks ago. You could have hired him 9 months ago. You got rid of him 3 years ago. Tell me why you think this is a good situation.
The 3 tread, as Aaron Brightman called it. I really like that nickname. Third time.
The 3 tread. Oh, get a t-shirt. Trademark that shit, Brightman. Get that on a t-shirt. I'll buy it. With a tread, you have a Robb Smith's face and the tire tread down the center. That's gold.
It's pretty good, right?
Money, mint that. Sell that in the rack.
So let's just like kind of set the scene here, right? Like, I think very clearly the number one target for this defensive coordinator spot was Corey Heatherman, the former linebacker coach under Joe Harris-Simiak. Obviously runs a similar system to Harris-Simiak. Did an excellent job at Minnesota, right? PJ Fleck, not to let Greg Schiano outdo him for the 70th time by stealing one of his coaches, learned his lesson and almost immediately extends his contract, which makes it prohibitive for Rutgers. He wasn't smart enough to make it prohibitive for every team in the country, right? Because Miami obviously came in and took him, but he made it essentially impossible for Rutgers to hire him. The money was just not hard to justify paying him that much money for a buyout and then paying his salary, right? So you move on to your next options. And essentially it looked like they waited for the NFL to end. Some guys in the NFL, I mean, namely Anthony Campanelli was clearly the big name that you would hope to try to get. Seemed unlikely. 1, because he was going to get NFL looks, and 2, because Penn State had a DC opening and he was in the conversation there. Right. But I guess you take a shot there. It's hard to blame them for trying.
Campanelli's the Danny Hurley of football coaches. Like, it was how many times you're going to try to hire him at Rutgers? Maybe he's not coming here. Okay.
Well, much like Dan Hurley, I think that window is closed considering he got a DC job in the NFL. Right. Seems like he's a little far ahead to Rutgers DC. And then the other thing that plays into all this is the calendar, right? Like, there's a real time crunch here between bowl prep, especially with Greg having to be the DC for the bowl game. That takes away some of his time. Portal recruiting, high school recruiting. This is a part where you can't really have your cake and eat it too, right? Because people are so fired up about the portal haul they've got, the high school recruiting class they're building in 2026. And to get that takes a lot of time and effort from Greg Schiano. Doing in-home visits with high school kids at the start of January, spending a lot of time meeting with and recruiting the portal kids, collecting the money to pay these portal kids, right? Revenue sharing playing a big part, but we still got to collect the NIL war chest. All this stuff takes time and becomes the priority. So you can't say, I'm glad we get all these recruits, and then say, why aren't you spending more time trying to get a coordinator?
Right. Yep.
Now, obviously, again, I agree with you. This is an underwhelming hire. It's not going to win the press conference. I think I was shocked to see it, right? Because to your point, they didn't renew his contract. You could say he fired him. They technically did fire him. Whatever. Semantics here. The point is they chose not to return him because he did not do a great job with those first 2 teams, which, again, were bereft of talent. Had no talent. This is probably the best of a bad situation in that you get a guy in Robb Smith who knows Greg's defense, who's an X's and O's guy in an era now where being a personable, coach is not as important as it used to be because you don't have to recruit, you don't have to get these guys, and you fill in that hole with a Zach Sparber, a New Jersey guy, Bergen Catholic alum, and rising star in the ranks, who is apparently, he blew Schiano away in his interview, from what I've heard, and is really well liked among high school coaches in the area, right? So you pair a guy in Robb Smith, who's an X's and O's guy, with a guy who's going to be personable to the players on the roster, who's going to be a stud recruiter, or you should say, you hope develops into a stud recruiter that you can groom to eventually become the play caller in, 2 years, 3 years, whatever the time is, right? Is it ideal? I think obviously hiring Corey Heatherman would have been the best case scenario. I think his absence this year was clear, given how much the defense regressed, injuries notwithstanding. But you couldn't get him. You couldn't get Anthony Campanelli. This is about as good as Rutgers could get, considering also that this was always going to be Greg Schiano's defense. And it's going to be hard to convince another, a defensive coordinator with standing in another Power 5 program to come here and run another guy's defense.
Right. And I get that. That's totally, I think that's the core to this, right? He wants someone he can trust to run his defense. The counterpoint that I would make is that his defense wasn't very good this year. Right. And I get it. All right. I get it. Injuries, the more personnel. You lose your best player before the season starts. A lot of things happen, and I understand that. But what concerns me about this and other hires like this, and I think people in the coaching profession fall back on my guys, my tree. We need to have it. It's that you're limiting the new idea thing. Like, what I'm talking about? Like you're relying on the same people who've done the same thing, who know your routines, and that's not always a good thing. Like every now and then you need to shake yourself out of your comfort zone. It's not like this is not Buddy Ryan's 46 with the Bears. I mean, this is This is not some defense that it has to run Greg's defense. I mean, I get it. It's his baby, and I've heard this a million times, and I understand that. But at the same token, it's not a bad thing to bring in someone from the outside, fresh set of eyes who can challenge Greg on things, who can, I don't know that this duo is going to be that. So it's really going to be up to Greg Schiano. Maybe that's the way it should be, to improve this defense, because I don't see it coming from the two guys that they brought in. I think it's going to be very clear that for whatever he's doing, the other 12 responsibilities as a CEO, an NIL fundraiser, and special teams coach still, he's going to have a big impact, a big say on this defense.
Yeah, and I think that's always just going to be part of the deal. It's a non-negotiable when you have Greg Schiano as your head coach, right? And it's worked to a good degree for most of his tenure, right? But I agree that there is a question here of how much this impacts the ceiling, right? Like, can this Greg Schiano defense, running the same guys, as you aptly put it with the recycling GIF when they hired him, like, is using the same guys over and over, the same philosophy, the same idea, limiting what this program could be? The counterpoint, obviously, is that when you go outside the tree, outside of guys you trust, it doesn't necessarily work out, right? Like, right. Sean Gleason is the name that got brought up to me a couple times, where he's a guy that was innovative, won the press conference, was this great home run hire, and in 2.5 years, he gets fired because he won't run the damn ball against Nebraska, and then the offense craters.
Yeah, let me just push back on that idea for a second, though. Like, the Robb Smith and Sean Gleason were coordinators at the same time, right? Like, who had more talent there? Like, we didn't talk about, it's funny, we pushed back on, like, well, Sean Gleason Robb Smith didn't have the same talent he had back then. He had more talent than Sean Gleason, I guess. Like, right? It was a non-functional offense. Anyway, I totally understand that. He's going for known commodities. I think he is. Part of that is that it worked with the offense. Like, he hired a guy he trusts in Kirk Shiraka. He hired experienced coaches, like Flaherty to fix positions on offense, and it worked. Like, the offense is now a functional thing. So he's going to do the same thing on defense. And I also do agree that it's really a Jimmy and Joe thing, not an X's and O's thing. And they've brought in some Jimmies. So
yeah. I think the Shiraka hire is a great, like, one-to-one comparison. Even in the reaction when he was hired last year, I think it was pretty much similar.
Yeah. I had it
again.
I had it. Wasn't that the guy? And he fired him too. It was 10 years, not 3 years. But again, another guy. That's the column I wrote. I was like, this is the guy that Greg Schiano fired. He's bringing him back. Yeah. So it's one-to-one, almost exactly.
Right. And it took a year, but it worked out, right? Like, people love Kirk Shiraka now. He's one of the 20 best paid offensive coordinators in the country. I'm not saying that's going to necessarily happen with Robb Smith, but I think that's kind of the hope, right? And I think ultimately that's what matters. We can debate how good of a hire it is now in January. What really matters is in September, October, November. Are all these Jimmies that he added going to be playing at a high level in Robb Smith's defense? We'll see. But I think, the talent thing is interesting, right? Like, you could say that when he had talent in 2012, they had a really good team. They were co-Big East champions, right? The counterpoint is that was probably the most talented Rutgers defense ever. And they couldn't win an outright Big East title, despite the fact it was pretty much there for the taking. You had Teddy Bridgewater on one arm and one leg, and you couldn't stop him as a defense, right? Like that.
Rutgers fans are having a good day. Don't go there with them.
I'm just saying.
They're fine. They walked the. Oh, Brian brought up the Teddy Bridgewater game. Now I'm gonna. Yeah, no, my day is ruined.
I'm just saying.
What's he gonna bring up next? The drop in the end zone in West Virginia. What else you got, Fonseca?
I will not bring up James Townsend.
Townsend.
I think with a lot of the things we talk about, right? Like, there are ways to justify and spin really anything, any which way you want. I think, again, the results that matter are what happens this fall. I will say, though, anyone who's feeling disappointed, disillusioned with the hire, I totally understand it. I think it's completely justifiable. And this is going to be up to Greg and Robb Smith to prove them wrong. I think they do have a pretty big responsibility there, because if this doesn't go well, then we're having a huge philosophical discussion on, Greg Schiano's coaching decisions and his comfortability in expanding his coaching tree, as you said. So this could be a really big litmus test on, like, how successful can the Greg Schiano model be, at least as far as it pertains to the coaching staff hires and the defense he runs.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's going to be a fascinating season for a lot of those considerations. We're obviously a long way from that, but that should put that on the list of things that is going to make this interesting football season coming up. All right. I want to take a couple questions. We didn't get a lot of questions. People weren't expecting us to have a second pod this week, our loyal listeners. We just talked about Greg on Twitter wanted to know, does this mean Shiano will be more hands-on with the defense? I mean, more is a hard one to say. I think he was pretty hands-on with the defense, generally speaking. And I think he leaves the offensive alone. Yeah, I think it might mean he's more hands-on with defense. Absolutely.
Again, I don't know the intricate details of how involved he is. I don't know how you quantify that. I think it's certainly, I agree with you there that he is more involved in the defense than the offense for sure, right? I'd be surprised, shocked even if it was not the case. I don't know. I think if he sees something he wants to correct, he'll get into the meeting rooms and he'll have his input. I'm not sure how much he's, impacting play calling during the games and all that stuff, but I certainly think he is going to be involved, and Robb Smith is essentially an extension of him, right? Like I think Robb Smith is being brought in to run Greg Schiano's defense, and by proxy of that, he will have big input, obviously.
Right. I've saved this question from friend of the pod, JP. I don't know if it was a question. It was a question, but it was more of an observation. And it was kind of, it's been on the bottom of our script. Believe it or not, we do script this show, folks. For a while, I'm looking for the right time to spring it out. But this was his observation. I have found there are three types of Rutgers fans: the unrelenting optimists, the beaten down but content, and the fans who realize nothing ever changes. At some point, every Rutgers fan enters each phase. Thoughts? I just love that. And I don't know if is it unique to Rutgers. It might be unique to Rutgers, but it's certainly a college sports thing. And I see that. And what I love about it is, like, after games, you'll get like the different part of each faction will rear their heads. Like some will disappear for a few days after losses, and then all of a sudden, oh, look who's back, like after a win. And it is great. I think that, do you agree with that? Those are the three categories: unrelenting optimists, like we all know a couple of them, the beaten down but content. I mean, that would probably be, I don't know, 40% of the fan base. And then the fans who realize nothing ever changes. And based on my inbox, I would say that is the majority of the fan base at any given point. What do you think?
Well, realize nothing changes implies like a peace of mind. I would say that's complete opposite, right? People realize nothing's ever going to change and they're furious about it, right? Like,
exactly. It's a good point. They're not happy about it not changing. That's a great point. Yeah. Make sure you understand it. They cannot
accept it, right? Like they know it's not going to change, but they think it should change and they lash out because of it. And I think that's natural, right? Like, look, we had this discussion and people were calling for Pikiell's job a month ago when everything was going off the rails, right? And people were like, why, only at Rutgers are they doing this? Brad Underwood took this team to an Elite Eight recently, and they're already saying they should fire him because the ceiling is too low after losing to Rutgers. This happens everywhere, right? I wouldn't be surprised if they called for Coach K's job after every loss at Duke. Like, I think all these feelings are, unique to Rutgers, and we live in this little fishbowl. I should say not unique to Rutgers, but we live in this little fishbowl, so it feels like we're having this unique experience.
Right. Yeah. I will say that a season, like I've been waiting 26 years doing this, like for a season that will change this. And I wonder, like, if all of a sudden, like, could a season like this where everyone kind of reaches the same conclusion, or that's that third group, like it never changes. If all of a sudden this team, emerges from like Phoenix with the ashes, whatever cliche you want to use, and all of a sudden it is the 30 for 30. And this is the season. Like, I wonder if that could shake some people out of the nothing ever, like that third category of people would be like, wow, something did change. Like, I've been waiting to see that season. I'm sure fans feel the same way.
I think you need two things. A huge year, 06, right? Mm-hmm. 06 was that season for football. I think that, a lot of the fan base is there because of 06, and they still are stringing themselves along every year, hoping to get the same dopamine hit that 06 was, right? Yeah. But I think you got to compound that with sustained success, right? I think if they had a huge year this year in football and basketball, that would be great to, spur excitement for a year or two, but that only matters if you can consistently become a winning program. Maryland basketball has a humongous fan base yes, because they won the O2 National Championship. I think that does humongous wonders for the enthusiasm around the program. But they were also a perennial top 10 team for years on either side of that. And that builds a fan base. Like the Maryland basketball fan base is hardcore, man. The Indiana basketball fan base, despite them sucking for the past 20 years, is the most hardcore fan base outside of
Absolutely. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
That's how you build this stuff. And that's why you look at the 100s at the rack, a lot of these people are guys who were around for 1976, right?
Yeah.
And they've been chasing that dopamine hit for 50 years. They've had lives. They've had entire lives. They graduated college. They had children. They've had ups and downs, the trials and tribulations of life.
Replacements. They can't get up to the 100. That's the problem. Soon they won't be able to physically get up to the 100s anymore.
It's coming, yes.
It's coming for those guys. Yeah.
I think to answer the question, the only thing that shifts this balance of the three categories is a seismic shift in results.
Right. There you go.
And I think, as we said many times, this was supposed to be the season.
Right. Still can be. There's someone saying, "Why did let the season play?" Those guys right now. Those guys they're back. They're not quite jumping into the room, but they're peeking around the corner. Let the season play out, Brian. All right.
Last night was a big let the season play out. I told you. Last night was a big I told you so. Brian, you were so negative when they were losing all those games. How about now when they won one game?
Too soon for the I told you so. There could be a time. There could be a time where Brian and I would have to spread some shit onto a couple pieces of wheat bread. A lot of people are going to have to eat a shit sandwich if this team does what it can do, if it completes this,
If there's anything Rutgers basketball is good at, it's making me eat shit. So I would not put it past them.
All right. One last question, because it's come up a lot in the what ifs. What would Rutgers' record be had they been able to keep Cliff and Mawad? And so I looked it up. I was just curious. I had kind of forgotten about Cliff. Certainly had forgotten about Mawad Mag. Cliff's averaging 18 minutes a game, 7.2, 6.4. So he's a rotational player, but not an impact player at Alabama. Mawad Mag, 16.4 minutes, 5.8 points a game, although recently playing more than he did early in the season. So he's kind of looks like he's carved out a little role for himself out BYU. I don't know. It's a what if you'll be asking yourself for a long time. I think certainly they would be much better. It'd be a different team, maybe, if Cliff embraced the role like he has had to embrace at Alabama, where like they don't throw him the ball at all. Like if he just did defense, rebounding, rim protection, here, obviously this would be a different team. There's no question. And Mawat, he's the defender that they don't have. Yeah, I don't think, it's not a conversation. You take some of the guys out of the rotation, Dylan Grant wouldn't be playing. It would be a totally different team.
And look, if we're playing a hypothetical, right, we're assuming the best case scenario. You have a healthy team. You have the best defensive center Rutgers has had, and since Hamidi Njai, right? You have the best on-ball defender not named Caleb McConnell of the Steve Pikiell era, and you have 2 5-star freshmen who are elite scorers. This team would be competing for a Big Ten title and a top 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, right? But again, we're living in this hypothetical world where anything is possible, right?
Anything's possible.
So,
what if Politi went to business school out of college? What if I invested in NVIDIA stock when my father-in-law was sitting on the couch and he invested? This is a great story. Can I tell this story?
Sure.
So my father-in-law is on the couch and he's watching my son play Grand Theft Auto. And he sees like he's my son. And of course, like if you play Grand Theft Auto, you can imagine having your 80-year-old, father-in-law. It's hilarious. So I had to leave the room. But during this time, my father was so inspired that he looked up the chip maker for the game, NVIDIA, which if you know anything about the stock market, you now know that was the stock of this dare say of the 21st century. He bought whatever a reasonable number of that stock, and yeah. So he said, yeah, if he had turned to me and said, "Hey, Steve, I'm going to buy a shit ton of this stock. You should," and I go, "Oh, that's a great idea, Chuck. Let's do that." At least one of us did, right? Where was I going with this story? The what ifs, of course. Yes, the what ifs of life. It's all about the what ifs.
What if he just gave you a 10%, as a feel bad fee? Like, I feel bad. I didn't tell you.
He's eventually going to give us 25%. He's healthy. Don't listen to this. Chuck, cut this out, Chuck. Yo, you're fine. I'm kidding, Chuck.
Just
imagine, like,
did he sell his
my
stock?
father listens to he listens to the Rutgers Rant. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Well, clearly he doesn't, because that would imply he's a Rutgers fan and he would give money to the department, which is not happening.
Right, exactly. It would be pretty funny. You could find out, oh, I could have helped my son's career. I could have bought the power forward they need with the NVIDIA stock that I got sitting on the couch watching Julian play Grand Theft Auto. It could be great. Yeah, it could have worked.
Did he sell his stock?
I don't think so. I think it's a stock. I think that's a stock.
If he's holding, then you should just hope that it tanks so you can laugh in his face.
I hope it tanks. It's going to put the kid through college now. That's the only hope we got. It's the stock. And he'll remember it. And this kid inspired somebody at Rutgers is going to get a bill. I'm going to send it to him. here's your Grand Theft Auto stock, Chuck. Could you help me out here with this? By then, tuition at Rutgers will be $150,000 a year to pay off all the student fees from the $150 billion. All right, we've gone too far. This has gone off the rails. Anything else? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, Sunday could be a really big day for Rutgers athletics. Rutgers could go to Maryland and get a huge hoops win, and Isaiah Pacheco could make it 3 for 3 in Super Bowls, which would be really, really impressive.
It's wild. Yeah, and he's doing the thing that he does for Rutgers. I mean, I saw some clips of him talking like someone asked about one of the incoming recruits. He's just giving him advice at the podium. Yeah, he's representing Rutgers well. Big day, big possibility. What do you think? Give me gun to your head. They're gonna beat the Terps?
No, I think the matchup inside is too much to overcome, and I think this team has shown little ability to consistently string together good performances. Mm-hmm. I was a little caught off guard. I thought you were going to ask me if the Birds or the Chiefs are going to win. So I was formulating that.
You got in that game. Go ahead. Make a pick there.
The Chiefs have satanic power, so they're going to win, obviously.
Yeah, take the best quarterback in that game. That's what I would say.
I read your column, by the way. I don't think Giants fans should root for Saquon Barkley. I think they should be fueled by hate and hope that he gets one rushing yard and doesn't win. I just can't. I can't.
The cancer-riddled kid who she changed his life at the end and didn't sway on that. No. Because as good as he could be a great guy off the field, but when it comes to sports, right? If my favorite team sucked, and our biggest rival was in a final, I would hope a meteor crashes into the stadium before I root for the team to win. Right. So if this were FC Porto, you're not. Is that the rival? No, Sporting's your team.
If Benfica was in the Champions League final,
gotcha. Okay.
I would give everything I own for them not to win. I mean, sincerely. So like, if that's the equivalent for Giants fans, they're going to be the biggest Chiefs fans in the world, right? Mm-hmm. You could kid yourself that you're rooting for Spags, right? And like all this different Giants angle, which is also a Rutgers angle too. Great story from Daryl.
Yes, you got to read that story. I got to tell you, Daryl Slater killed it on a story about Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs defensive coordinator, 2 years at Rutgers, which I didn't know any of that. So if you can tell me something I didn't know at all this time there, it was really good stuff.
So if you want to root for Spags, go ahead. But we all know that the Giants fans are rooting heavily against Saquon Barkley, as they should. That's why sports is great. You can see a guy who's a great guy off the field, exemplary human being, and you can boo the hell out of him because he doesn't play for your favorite team. That's the beauty of sports, man.
That's beautiful. All right. Well, we'll talk about the Super Bowl next week. Talk about the Maryland game. Come back here on Monday. See what happens. See if they can keep the thing rolling. At least for a week, you got some hope. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.